That's very interesting. It will be interesting to have a look at them. All right, now looking at maybe when you started to read about Egypt, about ancient Kemet, about Africa in this case, no? Did you happen to read maybe some books that were written by Africans on the topic? Can you share any of them with us that maybe sort of that you find interesting to help you understand it? Just let us know how some of those information you get there. Yeah.
Yeah, so one of, like I mentioned, one of the very big scholars from the mid to late 20th century in Africa who were writing about ancient Nile Valley cultures was Sheikh Anta Diop. And Sheikh Anta Diop and Theophile Benga, who I mentioned earlier, together went to and represented a perspective at a conference that involved a lot of other Egyptologists as well in the 1970s. And this conference was sponsored by UNESCO. And there was a publication that was a result of this conference, and it's available for free on UNESCO's website. It's a whole series of books. I believe it's called The General History of Africa by UNESCO. And there's a volume on ancient Africa. And so in that volume is writings from this conference that I mentioned. And Sheikh Anta Diop and Theophile Benga are represented there, as are other Egyptologists. And the person who edited the volume, who sort of convened that whole conference, was an Egyptian Egyptologist by the name of Gamal Mokhtar, who had been the head of the Antiquities Service in Egypt. So you have Sheikh Anta Diop, you have Theophile Benga, you have Gamal Mokhtar, all of whom are Africans working on ancient Nile Valley. So that volume is for free online. Like I mentioned, there are a lot of Egyptian and Sudanese scholars who work in Egyptology and Nubiology. One who I'll mention is Fekri Hassan, an Egyptian Egyptologist who writes a lot about ancient Africa, and again, about connections within Africa, and about the Nile Valley's place in Africa, so as an African entity and connections among ancient populations. So those are all good names to go and look at, I think.
Mhm. Now, as an Egyptologist, looking at maybe the work of Cheikh Anta Diop on the conference of 1970, for example, which have become very popular among African, of course, among many scholars who are trying to understand the history of Egypt, and by extension, the history also of Africa. What is your take on his line? I mean, what is your take on his take on the story?
Well, he published a lot, so he had a lot of takes, and a lot of what he said I very much agree with. There's a few things here and there that I guess I would say I don't agree with, but that's where the state of the field was at that time. There's a lot of things I don't agree with that a lot of Egyptologists say, right? Because this is the point. We're all learning as we're researching, right? And so a theory that's floated out at one time may seem to be correct, and then with more evidence or different interpretations, it's shown to be not correct. And it's not a big deal, or let's say it shouldn't be a big deal, because we're all in this together, right? We're all trying to understand these ancient cultures. So if I say I don't necessarily agree with everything he said, it's not a slam on him. It's that, additional evidence has come to light since the time that he wrote, or new interpretations have been applied on evidence. And again, like I would never dismiss a scholar outright, just because I disagreed with something that they said. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of scholars who I might disagree with a point here or a point there, but that doesn't mean that they're bad scholars or I disagree with anything they say. This is why these fields are so important, that we continue to staff them with researchers, because we are continually learning, we're continually re-understanding or understanding new aspects of things that we hadn't considered before. So it constantly changing, and very important that it do so, because we don't want to get sort of stuck in one old line of thinking,
All right. If I were to say maybe one or two things that you didn't agree particularly from Check at the Diop, what would that be?
So I mentioned earlier that I am not a specialist in ancient languages. But I know from people who are specialists in ancient languages that some of the connections he was making between language groups are no longer considered to be accurate by specialists in ancient languages. So I am following the lead of people who are experts in the area of language studies, and I believe what they say, since it's their field of research. I rely on their work.
All right. Okay. We'll leave it there. I'm not going to, for the sake of time too, but we could actually take it further than that. So I want to thank you so much. Now, for people that want to find out more about what you do, your books and also to connect with you. So use this moment to connect with people. Tell them how to find you.
So you can find me on the website academia.edu, where a lot of scholars have pages and upload their research. I have a page there, and everything that I'm able to provide freely there for people, I provide. Some journals won't let you post your information, your journal article, but everything that I can post there, I do. And so you can download it for free. I also am a scholar working with the Nile Valley Collective, and you can find us at nilevalleycollective.com. We are an international group of scholars who work to discuss the ancient Nile Valley cultures in their African contexts.
For somebody who wants to understand more about Egypt, about ancient Kemet, about Africa, say maybe for example looking at the Nile Valley, what would you recommend? Maybe books or I don't know, maybe courses, a way that this person can have a kind of a broad view of that history.
I think that the UNESCO volume that we talked about is a very good place to start, because it is a general history of Africa. It's understanding those cultures in an African context. And then I would say the subsequent volumes in that same series, because as you mentioned, there are so many other ancient cultures in Africa that in the US, and I suspect in many other parts of the world, we're just not hearing enough about in our history classes.
All right. Would you want to add anything to the conversation to conclude it? Because we really have touched different angle. It can be a message, whatever you want to add to conclude it.
Well, I want to thank you for the invitation to come and talk with you. I've listened to many of your other podcast interviews, and I really appreciate the work that you're doing you bring such a diverse group of people into your podcasts, covering all sorts of occupations, all sorts of backgrounds, all sorts of walks of life. And so I want to thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I really do appreciate that.